One of the best wines of my life, it was a bottle from 1958. When you have this smell, this complexity, I was close to cry. Sometimes Barolo can put you in this condition.
Hi, I'm Derek Morrison and welcome to another episode of Bring Your Own. For today's episode, we're very excited to celebrate one of Italy's most noble grape varieties, Nebbiolo. Joining us with some incredible bottles from their own cellars are Luca Roagna from his family's domain in Barbaresco and David Harvey, wine merchant based in London, UK with Raeburn Fine Wines. We're very fortunate to be hosted by the great team at Fera at Claridges in Mayfair, one of London's most iconic hotels. It was an incredible pleasure to occupy this beautiful restaurant. If you enjoy the episode, please take some time to review online and share with your friends. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us tonight to celebrate some Nebbiolo and crack open some pretty deserving bottles. Let's just go around and quickly introduce ourselves. We'll start with you, David. Why don't you just tell us a bit about who you are, what you do?
Thanks. David Harvey from Raeburn Fine Wines, based in Edinburgh and London. And Piedmont is one of our great loves and sort of specializations.
Fantastic. And we're very honored to have you with us, Luca, today. Big fan of your wines, both professionally and personally. So I'm quite excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about what you're up to in Piedmont?
Thank you so much. I'm Luca Roagna, Roagna family, the fifth generation of our family in classic winemaking. I'm from Barbaresco village, a really tiny village with 600 people. Really, we have more hectares than people in the area, and we have vineyards between Barolo and Barbaresco. I work with my father Alfredo. We work in 15 hectares, half in Barbaresco and half in Barolo appellation. Fantastic.
So you have a couple bottles that you make to share with us. Why don't you? I'll tell you what. We can pour them out and we can taste, and you can tell us a bit about them. Start with the Paje on the right.
Great.
And Pira on the left. I think it's quite interesting to start to talk about Nebbiolo, talking about the two appellations of Langhe, the Barbaresco and the Barolo wines, because are similar but so different. The appellation of Barolo and Barbaresco have to be made. The wine have to be made with 100% Nebbiolo. With aging in barrel, could be 3-4 years. For example, we release after 5 years, but is our choice. And the soil composition is really different. Is why we consider Nebbiolo one of the great variety of the Langhe, because every little detail inside of the soil different make completely different wines.
So we're tasting first the Pira, the Barolo, and yeah. I guess kind of common assumptions would be that people generally regard, the introductory text on the Langhe is that Barbaresco is the easier, more approachable in its youth, more delicate expression, whereas Barolo is regarded as the bigger, more powerful one. So
everybody think like.
I mean, obviously, it's too broad of a perspective. It's too broad of things to say. But tell us a little bit why you think we should drink the Pira before the Paje in this state.
Talking in general, I agree with you, because if we try many Barolo from different historical parcels, we say menzione geografica aggiuntiva for the cru. A lot of Barolo are more powerful, more tannic than a lot of Barbaresco. But to be more precise, we have really to talk about every single vineyard. For example, we are not really common in the expression of Barolo and Barbaresco, because our Barolo come from a monopoly vineyard, who is Pira. Is one of the oldest property of Casteligione Falletto. We found documents about 500 years ago talking about this vineyard. And Casteligione Falletto is really known to be the elegant village of the Barolo. We are in the area of the Rocche. This means our soil with a lot of different layers. You have to consider Langhe. In Langhe we have sedimentary soil, mainly our white soil with a lot of limestone, marl, grey, blue marl, and sometimes sand. And the unicity of the Rocche is the composition of this soil is really stony soil with a lot of different layers. And our monopoly vineyard Pira come from the destruction of the rock. And it is easy to understand. If you have a really rocky soil, the wine will be really mineral, not aggressive and so elegant. And this is why Castiglione Falletto is known to be one of the elegant terroir.
And there is some sand in Pira as well?
Something unique. You can find red sand only in, not everywhere, some vineyards in Serralunga d'Alba, some vineyards in Castiglione Falletto. I don't know in a lot of other places. And the sand is always important, a little part of sand, because give a little bit less of alcohol inside of the wine, little bit less of color, and for Piemontese producer we are never worried if the color is not too dark, and more finesse. The elegance in the nose is something unique if you have a little touch of sand inside.
A bit more perfume as well.
Yes,
can be.
Yes. Yes, of course, after every approach, every different vinification make different wines. But usually if you have sand in the soil, you have the touch of the elegance.
Everything you vinify, everything's vinified in Barbaresco. And because it's quite a historic estate, obviously going back centuries, you're kind of grandfathered into that respect.
Yes.
Is that?
Historically it was like this, but recently we opened a new building for in Pira, exactly in Pira. And now also, if it's really family business, if we are only 2 persons, we have 2 cellars. The Barbaresco cellar in Paje vineyard for the vinification of all the Barbaresco wines, and in Pira for the Barolo.
And so is that a change in the
in 2000
regulation?
The first vintage we made the Barolo in Castiglione Falletto is in 2010.
Ah, okay.
Yes. Before, historically, we vinified everything in Barbaresco,
okay.
And this is something unique because we have the right, because we are a historical cellar. This means more than 50, 60 years ago or 100 years ago, we made in that cellar the Barolo and the Barbaresco wines.
So what made you decide to open the
the idea of the family, also if it's not easy, because when you are not a lot of people, you have to follow 2 places, but from the harvest, when we cut the grape to the barrel, the time have to be really fast. And now we consider half an hour. Okay. Before, for harvesting and transporting the grapes, it was a little bit longer.
Plus the traffic jams in the country,
yes,
harvest time, behind tractors.
And you have to consider, we always think about the details, but when you work, you do the family business, you have to do all the things. This means or you harvest or you are in cellar. If the cellar is 20 kilometers far, because Barolo and Barbaresco are 20 kilometers far each other, you can't be in cellar. And we try to be focused also of what happened in cellar, is why we decided to do something also in Castiglione Falletto, because when we pick grapes in Pira, me or my father, one of the 2 is in cellar, the other one is in the vineyard. We check everything.
So what's the, I'm going back to the Paje as well now. Both of these are the 2012, both are from the old vines, selection of the vineyards, harvested and picked then and then vinified, different parts of the town. Yes. So how far apart did you harvest?
The parcels are really far. I would like to tell you this because in our estate we decided to do also the selection by age of the vines. This is our rule, is a Roagna rule, but below 25 years old we think it's not interesting to release a Barolo or a Barbaresco, because the vines are too young. This means all the vines until 25 years old, the fruit we put in an entry level. Langhe, Rosso, is the generic wine. And after, between 25 and 50 years old, we make the single vineyard. And only after 50 years old, we make the old vines. I think it's so important to work in this way, and I think I have also other friends in the region, they do similar for the Barolo and the Barbaresco, and it's so important because I told you we work in a sedimentary soil, and this means we have a lot of different layers deeper underground. If you have a vine young, like 5, 6 years old, when the vine start make production, the roots are really short, are maybe half meter or less than 1 meter, and the roots are only in the first part of the soil. And when we talk about terroir, or when we talk about soil, the interesting part is what's happened when the vines become older, the roots go deeper, maybe 10, 15 meters or more, and take minerals from the different layers. at that point you will have a good expression of terroir. Before we consider a little bit too simple the expression, and this is why we do the different selections. The wines we are trying now are with old vines, this means more than 50 years old, but at this period are close to 80 years old, the young vines.
Okay.
In Pira, the last plantation was in 1937.
Wow.
And in Paje also are a little bit more than 75, the young vines. You have to consider we had phylloxera 110 years ago. We have also few vines with that age.
Wow.
Pira has the oldest vines that you have on the domain.
Yes, but the last plantation, because also in Asili, in Montefico, we have vines with 80, 85 years old at this point. And we are quite lucky because nobody in our family ripped up old vines. We always believe in the idea of keep the vines until are alive. And people ask me, how old do you think can live a vine? And my answer is, I don't know. Because
to be determined.
Yes, no,
Still
because,
counting.
yes, because we had the phylloxera only 110 years ago. It was quite long, but we still have vines with that age.
You know, we're tasting the 2012, the current release of these wines, and massively youthful, but there's still such an elegance and a balance and a transparency to the wines, which I love. I've always loved about your wines is that whenever I taste them, you know, you can see that there's still so much evolution to be had and so much ahead of these wines. But I always look for wines to be in balance, kind of at every state. And you know, there's a saying that a great wine is always a great wine, and a balanced wine always has that that elegance to it when you taste it. But both of these they're just so elegant. I mean, they're just so beautiful on the palate, even though they're obviously youthful, but quite approachable. I mean, what do you think that is a result of in terms of how you're vinifying?
I think this is a really big compliment. I really appreciate this because my grandfather always said we have to work for the elegance. We consider quite easy make rich, powerful wines, and it's quite easy make bodybuilder wines, but it's really more difficult work in the precision and the elegance. This is our deal. After every vintage is different, but we try to keep the classic. This means we don't want to destroy the roots of the family, but consider vinification in big barrels of oak, all natural yeast, all the classic old school, but try to keep also purity inside of the wines. And this means follow really a lot the grapes maturation, and also follow a lot also the wine during the aging.
So how long is the maceration and the
quite classic, 3 months.
But they're so pure and transparent.
Exactly.
In their youth, and I think that's the thing that is really commendable and needs to be highlighted in this wine. We're going to taste some young Nebbiolo from different producers from across Piedmont, but I think it's really important to highlight for people listening or watching to see. Obviously, we're tasting some youthful wines, but you shouldn't be scared off by that because there's so much purity in these bottles.
Oh, and I think thanks of the help of all the people of the area, now if you open or you drink or people know old Barolo, it was a wine not ready, never ready, or people wait 10 years, 20 years. Now I think in our generation we try to respect all the steps of the wine. This means keep the beauty of the classic expression, but keeping also the purity inside of the wine. And I think this is something different than 30 years ago. Is why everybody wait long time for drink. But I think a great bottle of Nebbiolo, if you like freshness, fruit expression, you can enjoy in the first 5-6 years. You can keep 10 years more, or you can keep 50 years if you want.
So we wanted to talk a bit about Nebbiolo, and so everyone was asked to bring a bottle from their own cellars. Luca, you've been very generous to bring a few examples of your wines and something else to share, which we'll get to. But I've always been, you know, I lived in Piedmont for a little while, and I just fell in love with the grape and with the wines of the Langhe. And then as I explored further afoot into Piedmont, into Lombardia, wines from Nebbiolo, it's just such a fascinating grape. And I think it's, we're going to taste a lot of different examples, and as you've already touched on, the effect of the terroir and how it responds to every different site is such an important detail to appreciating the grape. I wanted to make sure to bring something from outside of the Langhe so that we could look at a different, completely different climate in how it affects the grape. And so I brought the Ferrando Carema from, which is the northernmost appellation in Piedmont growing Nebbiolo. So let me get a bit in the glass and we can taste and talk about it.
Thanks.
There's something so beautiful about the vineyards in Carema. I mean, it's such a, you're on the side of the mountain, you've got these beautiful stone pillars and these pergola vineyards on the side. Most of it goes into the co-op, but then, Ferrando is I think it's the only producer in Carema bottling and producing their own wines. And it was just, after spending so much time in the Langhe, when I went up there, I'd never been up to that part and to see these wines and then to taste these really pretty. You can just see, the first thing you see is the color. I mean, it's, transparent wine. But I really like these kind of more alpine Nebbiolo appellations in a sense, because they give a completely different expression, but still a very much Nebbiolo. And there's maybe you could tell me a bit more about the different kinds of Nebbiolo, or perhaps you, David, in terms of getting outside the Langhe, different clones, or Chiavenasca versus Nebbiolo. But I just like that there's always this kind of this cool climate crunch and brightness, and especially in their youth, they're very rustic, but they have this kind of delicacy that I like, and I think I like the contrast of this with the more kind of powerful and maybe more profound. And this is a serious wine in its own right, of course. But yeah, it's really fascinating. So I don't know. What do you think of the wine?
It's nice. It's got a nice lightness to it, and more of the rose side of fruit on the inner palate. But I guess this is probably bottled quite a lot earlier than. How long has that been in bottle? A couple of years already.
I think so. Yeah, it's the current release, but it's been in bottle for a little bit before release, so settled down a bit in the bottle. But yeah, I mean, you feel that kind of rustic tannic profile, but again, as you said, that really kind of.
I really like the elegance also of this wine, the beauty of the Nebbiolo, every little difference, sometimes in the same hill, make different wines. If you consider South Piedmont and North Piedmont, the wines are obviously so different, but this is the greatness of the variety.
So when it comes to Nebbiolo, I mean, obviously we know it's a thin-skinned grape, very tannic, but very little pigmentation. With those different, those delicate expressions, what do you think it is that is maybe the most misunderstood, or people have the wrong idea about Nebbiolo?
For my point of view, the idea sometimes of some customers is Nebbiolo wines are big. Not at all. The main characteristic of a Nebbiolo is the elegance and the charm. Also, if you try the top wines of the Langhe or from everywhere where grow the Nebbiolo, you will find the crazy elegance. The full body wines, for me, are not the best expression, and you will find in the top vineyard so elegant wines. And sometimes people, I think, the big misunderstood sometimes is to think Nebbiolo is a really big, opulent wine. Not at all. It's one of the most elegant varieties. If it's from a good vineyard and if it's well made, you will find a lot of charm.
An elegant wine, or an elegant genre of wine for the kinds of wines that have almost everything as well, because you have quite good acidity and tannin and depth and body, but not too much of any of them if you're working in the finesse direction.
One of the things that I've always struggled with is it's always the hot vintages that get the big points, and these big opulent wines that get all the attention from some critics, and it's always just been a really confusing thing for me, because it's really that elegance, those contrasts, those nuances of the grape that are the most inspiring, and is what I kind of fascinated me about the grape. And I always find that in the really hot vintages, in the opulent styles, they tend to become very one-dimensional wines. I mean, they're impressive in this kind of bodybuilder way, as you said, but they don't really have any understatement. There's nothing that fruit overpowers the kind of more earthy and kind of pretty aromatics of it, and you kind of lose that. And do you think that that's maybe had some sort of effect on the consumers, where people will seek out some wines, or it will distract from what's maybe the essence of the grape? Or
I think every palate, every country have a different approach with wines, also with Nebbiolo. But I am sure if you ask a producer to bring an old bottle, they will bring always a cold vintage with a lot of complexity. The producer, like one of the last things I did, a friend asked for a bottle in the end of the 90s. I took a bottle of 99. And for a lot of people, 2000 is the vintage because it's more opulent, more...
Or 97.
Or 97 also. But if you talk with producers, we always prefer the elegance.
David, have you seen kind of like a trend, any sort of changes or shifts in the market?
With the producers that we work with, they're all working from Botte Grande. And so we're working with what are simplistically called the traditionalists rather than the modernists from Barrique. But and so as that's all we work with, then I only know how those wines are received. But I think it's interesting that when Barolo was kind of split almost cataclysmically, and they were perceived as being two distinct genres of Barolo, of course it was the modernists with their Barrique who actually caused a lot of press, made tastings around the world. And following on from the work of, for example, Gaia and Barbaresco, talking about Barbaresco and Langhe by default around the world, the modernists also took Barolo around the world. And you even had Italian guides like Gambero Rosso who simply gave terrible scores to any traditional producer and gave huge scores to anybody with a Barrique. And so the scales were really off balance for a while. But the good thing about people travelling in the world and talking about their wines is that it brought a lot of attention to all the wines in the wealth of Langhe, which has resulted in the traditionalists getting much more of a look in, and now pretty much anybody who's into serious wine is now going to revere the great traditional producers using Botte, large oak barrels. And the modernists, to be taken seriously, if you're using Barrique, you need to be working really subtly and elegantly with them to make it work. The small barrel wasn't the problem; it's how you use them that's the problem.
Right. I mean, and obviously that's the highlight for the, in that divide at the time. And it was, there's one that you touched on. Obviously, there's kind of people's tastes in different markets, tastes in different styles, and you can make wines of integrity in both camps, and there's dedicated vignerons in both camps, and people are growing their fruit in a way to match their vinification to a degree.
But perhaps just coming to a point of convergence or of the middle way. The traditionalists have lost the rusticity, and the modernists have lost the oakiness and the barriquiness, and so whatever vessel you're using, everyone's making them work better.
It's now more of a smaller piece of the process.
This is an evolution of.
And we're maybe just five vintages or 8 vintages into that kind of phase. So the first vintages of this new level of sensitivity are now coming to the market.
Has it become easier? Did you witness it firsthand?
Yeah, I guess I started going to Italy in '98 and did my first big trip for 2 weeks in the Langhe in 2001. The economic circumstances, the popularity of Langhe wines, the economic reality, the investment in the area, the expansion of vineyards, the refurbishment of cellars, the people buying the right equipment rather than using the wrong equipment. There's just been a massive, almost total change.
Yeah, I think I saw this because I started in 2001. I finished the enological school in 2001. I started the university, but at the same time, I was in charge of the vineyard and cellar with my father, and it was really different, the interest at that time. Also, it was a different period. The classic wine, maybe it was really less interesting for the market, for the customer. I am really proud of this evolution. I saw in my little less than 20 years of work in cellar, the evolution of the tasting of the persons, of the customers, and I am really happy to see this, because a lot of people now have knowledge, understand what means, what make one vineyard, another single vineyard, and I think is really different than 20 years ago or more.
Yeah, 20 years ago it was deep countryside. Yeah. Some importers would visit, a few producers might go out and do their sales trips, but 364 days of the year it was country.
And I guess just the starting point when you get the wines to a buyer or a customer at a table, I mean, you're beginning at that conversation at a different state in terms of like, okay, we are in this part of Italy, and you know, instead of starting at the, step one, you can maybe start a little bit more into the nuances about what's going on.
Yes, now when we talk about the wines, when I do discussions, we talk about details. Yeah. Before it was more...
starting from the beginning.
Yes, start from the beginning, explain the classic idea, and sometimes also... you said really correct things. Classic, it was rustic. I think
volatility.
Yes, it was
hard tannin.
Yes, but because also the area come from really poor region. Nobody changed the barrels for a long time. It was really old school farmer work, and I think it's so important to keep the idea and the work of the old style, but with the technology, with the system of today. In this way we can make more purity, but keeping the classic way to make wines.
Yeah.
So Luca, you brought a bottle from your cellar, not just one of the wines that you make. So this is a up and coming producer. No, no. Can you? This is quite a historic estate. Can you tell us a bit about the wine you brought?
In Italian we say this is a vino del cuore, a wine of the heart, and of course this is one of the iconic wines of the region. Now Maria Teresa, she is the boss in Bartolo Mascarello. Bartolo is one of the great men who create the reputation of Barolo all around the world. I think it was interesting to share with you this nice bottle, and 2013 is a magnificent vintage. For me, this is one of the best 13 of the Barolo area, and this is why I decided to bring this from my cellar.
Fantastic. Let's get some in the glass. David?
So if we were opening a bottle 20 or 30 years ago, made by her father, we would have opened it in advance, we would have decanted it, trying to soften the wine down. Of course. But you said earlier this wine is ready to go.
Yes, but I think this is the touch of our generation. I think if we work well, we don't make troubles, we keep the past, and we have only to tune a little bit things to make also to show the beauty of the first part of the wine. And for me, Maria Teresa, she's doing an outstanding work. And of course, I agree with you, David. Bartolo wines, they were never ready. But we discussed it before. I had one of the best wines of my life. It was a bottle from 1958. And when you have this smell, this complexity, I was close to cry. This was an outstanding wine, one of the outstanding bottles of life. And sometimes Barolo can put you in this condition.
Like at what point when you were growing up, did you have a wine that was just made you go, it went from being something on the table to something that made me go, wow, I want to create that. Did you have a moment at some point? Did you always?
Of course, one of the pleasure of my life is to enjoy bottles of wine from all around the world. I drink more or less wines from all around the world, and I am a producer of Barbaresco and Barolo. This means I drink also a lot of Barbaresco and Barolo wines. Talking about emotions, old Bartolo, I am also a big fan of old Giacomo Conterno, of course, and also old Bruno Giacosa. Bruno, unfortunately, he passed away recently. He was one of the great masters of the region. I think maybe I had not a long time ago the 78 from the Collina Rionda. And these are the wines you think, wow, without the technology, without anything, with a great vineyard, good grapes, with the knowledge of the winemaking, they create iconic wines. And of course, I don't have one wine, but many wines are in my heart, and it will be a dream to do similar things.
So David, you brought us a bottle. Why don't you tell us a bit about what you brought, why you brought it, and I'll pour while you do that.
I brought a bottle of Brovia with me. I didn't bring a bottle of Roagna because I figured someone else would be doing that. But it's a vineyard that I love a lot, now called Rocche di Casteligione under the new system. Used to be just called Rocche, that was it. There are perhaps 10 owners of Rocche, and it's the vineyard right next door to Luca's Pira. And he just told me earlier on today that he's just bought half a hectare of Rocche. So he's now one of the 10 owners.
It was a secret.
Was a secret. Now,
Breaking news! Love it.
which is, you know, it was kind of interesting as well because he's making a handful of Barbaresco in the old cellar, and then at Pira there's the new cellar to make 2 different wines just from Pira. So to have a new Barolo in the mix is pretty exciting. So this is like really welcome news. But it's a very special vineyard, like Pira. It's got a serious slope, a little bit of sand in the soil. It's quite free draining. The net result is you tend to get quite a lot of perfume in many vintages, especially when the wine is young. Some vintages are also pretty classic, but this is the lighter side of Casteligione, and Casteligione is the lighter side of all Barolo. We just had the Maria Teresa Mascarello, which was more classic, mid-plus weight, sort of solid, more square, structured Barolo.
Well, 11, as I remember, was really quite a hot vintage, but this has got it's ripe, and it's got but it's, as all the wines we've tasted have been wonderfully elegant, but you can just definitely feel a bit more roundness in the ripeness. You know, we've been tasting more on the kind of sour cherries, Morello cherries kind of thing. This has been a bit more kind of on the riper side of that fruit, but it's still so.
I think of the 11s that I know, they're slightly crunchier, slightly firmer structure, whereas 12s, like Luca's 12s, and also Brovia's 12s next door, it's a higher finesse or more suave vintage straight out of the bottle.
So David, do you want to tell us, did you have an epiphany, a Nebbiolo epiphany that maybe you want to?
Yeah, in about 1996, I remember very vividly my first Barolo that really sort of turned me on to Barolo was 88 Gran Busia. And now when you know that I'm a sort of into traditional style Barolo, that's kind of surprising. But I think it's a wine that in more vintages than not, it's the wine that Aldo Conterno really nailed through the last decades. That sort of awakened my interest in Barolo. Then in the late 90s, I lived in Edinburgh working as a head som, and there was a great friend of Raeburn, a chap called Silvio, had a restaurant, and we used to buy Barolo. The price went up £10 every decade. So a wine from the 60s cost £10 more than a wine from the 70s. And I remember having sort of all the Vietti single vineyard 71s, drinking several bottles of Giacomo Conterno 71, a special bottling they made for someone, and also various things from 64s, 61s from the 50s, and trying several producers, but also going back in time. And you know, of course, then as soon as I had the money, time, and the right kind of job, I was straight over to Barolo for a 2-week stay and visit lots of people. And then I went to live in Piedmont. So yeah, it's an area that's very close to my heart. But I think if we look at sort of all the famous grapes, or all the famous wine regions of the world, very few of them really truly deserve their reputation. And I think Nebbiolo is one of the great 5 red grapes, if not higher up. And I think Barolo and Barbaresco, they are one of the world's top 5 red wine regions. And there's maybe something else to think about as well, tasting the Brovia. Something that they share with Luca is a commitment to clean farming. And this is one of the other things that's come out in the last decades, has been a small body of producers, a growing body of producers who said, right, we're going to go organic, we're going to be highly sustainable, we're going to be certified or not. I can't think of a lot of producers in Piemonte who are totally biodynamic. It's more of an organic direction than biodynamic.
It's more organic than biodynamic, I agree with you. And for example, in our estate, I am really proud of my family because I only started in 2001, but our soil never touched chemistry because before the 60s or 70s, nobody used chemistry. And in the 70s, my father Alfredo, he was already involved in the business. He said, no, I don't want to do nothing about chemistry, and we have really clean soil. But all around, I have good friends. They work really well. They don't use any kind of herbicide, and they keep the grass. This is so important because at the end, we make wine. It's an element, have to be healthy. And of course, everybody knows we have alcohol inside, but all the other things that we don't want herbicide, pesticide in the wine.
And it's perhaps worth noting that of the 10 or so producers that form the group of Vini Veri, 2 of them are from the Langhe, and you know you've been participating in the Vignature tasting, and also you know many of the early raw fairs. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting being a producer from an established historic Barolo classic denominazione producer, but also at a natural wine fair. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the important thing to note, especially with Roagna, is that people, you know, look at that as kind of a more modern, contemporary thing. But the important thing to note with Roagna is that it's just been, you know, it's been centuries of just dedication and perseverance to a very dedicated philosophy. And I think that's so, you're not adjusting to them, you fit in because you've been doing it before it was cool, as they say.
Yes, but for my point of view, if you don't have life in your vineyards, in your soil, you can make wines with identity. And for us is something important working this way, because if we don't keep the grass, if we don't have animals around, we can't make the good habitat for the vines. The monocultura, the vines everywhere without other things, are not good. Is a problem. We need other kind of vegetable, other kind of grass, and this is good for the soil. If we don't have this kind of conditions, I am quite sure it's impossible to make wine with complexity.
So thank you so much for being here tonight, you guys, and Luca, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some beautiful wines. And we've got a bit of a special grand finale here to wrap up this pretty prolific tasting while we taste and wrap. I've got the 2008 Crichet Paje, one of your top wine, so let me pour that out for us while you tell us a bit about what is this mystery bottle you have covered in dust that you've brought.
But I always like to open something from our past. This wine was made from my grandfather Giovanni, and also with the help of my father Alfredo. Okay.
What a contrast. I think for me, Crichet Paje, you said it was bottled last summer?
Yeah, it was bottled the 2nd August 2017.
So it's still in that sort of first year or two where it settles down after bottling?
For us, this is a unique vineyard. My grandfather bought the Paje and the Crichet Paje in 1953. In the same year, my father Alfredo was born, and he found this plot is half an hectare, is quite tiny, is 0.52 hectares, different. He discovered this because he started vinify after 53, every vintage, and this barrel was never ready. 2 years of age, 3 years of age, 4 years, never ready. And he decided to use for the family Riserva. The first vintage we still have in cellar is the 58, and it was released with the name of Crichet Paje. In the first vintage it was 78. We don't release this wine every year, have to be something special. Of course it's always from this plot, but if it's not at the level for a Crichet Paje, we don't release it.
So on the hill of Paje, where is the Crichet Paje?
It's the higher part, but you need to know in Langhe we consider the best part, the noble part, never the higher part, never the bottom, always the middle part of the hills, or small hills well protected for the window.
Yeah. Like the amphitheater or the
exactly.
horseshoe.
A Paje is a perfect amphitheater. Yeah. If you come in a Paje vineyard, you will see, you know, we are in Langhe, Langue means tongue, and Paje is a classic tongue of the Langue. It's a really small area. All the Paje is like a little bit more than 4 hectares. We have 1.83 hectares for the different selection we do by age of the vines, and 0.52 hectares for this wine.
Yeah.
We consider this wine our most important wine, not because it's more complex, not because it's more fruitive, but because if you keep a long time, this wine will give you emotions. What about the second bottle? Do you have any idea? I like to do blind.
I mean, it tastes a lot younger than I was expecting it to.
It's very roses, it's very sort of Chinese rock tea. It's very, there's the oriental edge from it, and it's developed, it's maturely fragrant.
It's still got plenty of...
We enjoyed
posture.
the good thing of Nebbiolo, and we discussed it before about this, you can enjoy young, and it was what we did before, but Nebbiolo is this.
Yes.
Nebbiolo...
So this wine is still not old. This wine is still mid plus, medium to full maturity. It's still got time ahead.
I was alive. You know the rule of, David, you know the rule of our family. I am not allowed to bring bottles older than me, but this is not really far of my age.
So I know where we are. Now, I know he's born in 1981, so if this wine is younger than him, then it's soon after there.
Yes. It feels much younger than an 82 than any 82 I've tasted. It's like, I'm thinking 85, 88?
You are right. You said the correct vintage.
I'd have to say 88 because that would be my guess.
Wow.
Is the 88 Crichet Paje.
I remember having the blended Barbaresco
the
before with you.
Barbaresco.
Yeah.
I decided to bring one bottle of our history, and I decided to bring a Crichet Paje for show you the beauty of the Crichet Paje, because this wine never age, or of course age. Now we have a secondary, tertiary inside of the nose, but still
The structure's vibrant.
yes.
But not
you
harsh.
can, yes, you can keep this wine for other 20, 30 years without any problem.
In the first 10 years, must have been pretty tannic.
Yes, yes. Also, this was the way to make wines in the 80s. The hand of my grandfather, the hand of my father. Really classic, really tannic.
Yeah.
And, but I think you can find the fil rouge between the two wines.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing some exquisite bottles. We're waxing on Nebbiolo, and this is a pretty fitting way to finish the 20 years of the same vineyard. So, cheers, salute.
Salute.
Chin chin. Grazie mille.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you to Fera and the team here at Claridges for hosting us. And cheers.
Salute.
Fuck, that's good.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Please take a moment to give a review online @BYO Podcast.